The eyes of the world are fixed on a Cold War-era airbase where the United States President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin have just begun high-stakes talks. Now, in the balance, we see the fate of the Ukraine war. We also see the prospect of a nuclear arms deal, and then the possibility of a geopolitical shift that could ripple across Europe and beyond. As we dive into the details, these and many more will be explored in today's Flash News. Good afternoon and welcome. I am Tabitha Akor. Let's begin. The United States President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin meet today at a Cold War-era airbase in Alaska for talks that could shape the future of the war in Ukraine and nuclear arms control. While Trump hopes to secure a ceasefire, Putin has hinted at a new nuclear agreement as part of a potential bargain. We see that the summit, which is their first face-to-face encounter since President Trump's return to the White House, has stirred anxiety in Kyiv and European capitals over whether Ukraine's interests will be safeguarded. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, excluded from today's meeting, has also insisted that no territorial concessions should be made. Now let's take a listen.
Президент Трамп оголосив про підготовку своєї зустрічі з Путіним на Алясці. Дуже далеко від цієї війни, яка триває на нашій землі, проти нашого народу, яку все одно не закінчити без нас, без України. Звісно, ми не дамо Росії нагород за зроблене. Український народ заслуговує на мир, але всі партнери мають розуміти, що таке достойний мир. Відповідь на українське територіальне питання є вже в Конституції України. Відступати від цього ніхто не буде і не зможе. Дарувати свою землю окупанту українці не будуть. Цю війну треба закінчувати, і Росія має її закінчити. Росія її почала та затягує, не слухаючи ніякі дедлайни. І саме це проблема, а не щось інше. Ми готові разом з президентом Трампом, разом з усіма нашими партнерами працювати заради реального і, головне, тривалого миру. Миру, який не розвалиться через бажання Москви.
While we hope this war comes to an end, let me take your attention back to President Trump. We remember that President Trump once vowed to end the conflict within 24 hours. He has now acknowledged that the war has proven more complex than anticipated. Now, he has linked progress in Ukraine to the possibility of a three-way summit involving Zelensky, presenting himself as a global peacemaker. Let's take a listen.
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are.
Now, the meeting comes amid a backdrop of mutual needs. Trump seeks a diplomatic win that could strengthen his international profile, while Putin, on the other hand, faces economic strain from prolonged Western sanctions and may view arms control talks as a way to ease the United States pressure. Kremlin insiders suggest some common ground may already have been reached, potentially paving the way for a limited ceasefire in the air war. However, analysts caution that Moscow could agree to terms that leave it with strategic advantages, allowing it to escalate again if needed. Now, Putin's demands for a full settlement remain stringent. We see he is asking for a complete control of the Donbas industrial region, expanded territorial claims in Kherson and Zaporizhia, removal of NATO membership prospects for Ukraine, and restrictions on Kyiv's armed forces. Ukraine has rejected these conditions, and Ukraine views this as tantamount to surrendering to Putin. But then, whether Alaska will produce a genuine step toward peace or merely a diplomatic pause remains uncertain. We see that both leaders enter the talks with high political stakes. While the world looks in anticipation to the outcome of this meeting, one is poised to ask, what would be the implications for NATO if Ukraine's membership prospects are permanently removed as part of a settlement? And what would it be like for Ukraine too? Now, moving over to this report. In the United States, we see that in the United States, Trump is still moving on with his tariffs and sanctions. Now, Brazilian Congressman Eduardo Bolsonaro, son of former President Jair Bolsonaro, has warned of further United States sanctions against Brazilian officials and the possibility of additional tariffs as tensions escalate over his father's prosecution. Speaking after meetings with senior U.S. officials in Washington, Bolsonaro said he saw little chance of negotiating lower U.S. tariffs on Brazilian exports without concessions from Brazil's Supreme Court, which is overseeing the case against the former president. Now we see that Jair Bolsonaro is on trial for allegedly attempting to overturn the 2022 election results, a charge he denies. The case has drawn sharp criticism from the United States President Donald Trump, who recently imposed a 50% tariff on Brazilian goods and sanctioned the judge presiding over the trial. Eduardo Bolsonaro described the tariffs on beef, coffee, fish, footwear, and other goods as a form of pressure to halt what he calls an excessive legal offensive against his father. He argued that Brazil's institutional crisis must be addressed before any trade improvements can occur. Let's take a listen.
Alexandre de Moraes is still doubling down. The last thing that he did is put Jair Bolsonaro under Rome arrest, house arrest. And President Trump is saying that it's very bad, it's very ugly, all the lawfare that Jair Bolsonaro, his family, and his supporters are suffering in Brazil. So I could expect more tariffs because Brazilian authorities, they did not change their behavior. They are still doing everything wrong. They are still persecuting political opponents, and this is not a democracy. But it's a madness you believe that you are going all the time and talking things against President Trump, like Lula said, like a new Trump administration would be the new face of Nazism, and then you'll be received with a red carpet here in Washington, D.C. This is insane. So they have to look for what they are doing. I'm not responsible for the results of their behavior.
His perspectives right there. Meanwhile, the United States Department this week tightened visa restrictions on certain foreign officials, including those in Brazil, linked to a controversial Cuban medical exchange program. Bolsonaro expects that the measures could extend to Brazil's health minister and former President Dilma Rousseff. However, we see that Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has rejected U.S. pressure, calling it an affront to national sovereignty. He has also condemned both Bolsonaro's for seeking foreign intervention in Brazil's affairs. Brazil's top court is investigating the father and son over their appeals to Trump. Justice Alexandra de Moraes has placed the elder Bolsonaro under house arrest and barred him from contact with his son or foreign officials. Eduardo Bolsonaro suggested Washington could respond with further sanctions targeting Moraes and possibly more tariffs, citing the court's continued stance. Since relocating to the United States in March, Eduardo Bolsonaro has actively sought the United States political backing. While he declined to discuss his immigration status, he confirmed he and his family have permission to stay in the U.S. for an extended period and have not ruled out seeking asylum or citizenship. Now moving over to Iran. Iran, weakened by war and diplomatic stalemate, Iran's leadership faces a stark choice: to resist the United States and Israeli pressure, to halt nuclear activities and risk further military strikes, or return to negotiations and risk divisions within the ruling elite. We see that in June, a conflict sparked by Israeli air raids and United States strikes on 3 nuclear facilities exposed Iran's military vulnerabilities and shook its image as a formidable Middle East power. The attacks, which killed senior Revolutionary Guard commanders and nuclear scientists, disrupted plans for fresh nuclear talks with Washington. According to 3 Iranian insiders, the clerical establishment now sees renewed negotiations with the United States as the most viable path to avoiding a deeper crisis. While some hardliners blame diplomacy for lulling the military into complacency, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and senior officials are said to have reached a consensus that talks are essential for survival. The Foreign Ministry also, however, has not confirmed any decision so far. Now over to the United States, and what is President Trump saying? And what is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying? We see that the United States President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have warned they will strike again if Iran resumes uranium enrichment. Tehran has vowed to retaliate, but fears another round of attacks could disrupt political command, prompting contingencies plans to protect senior leadership. Let's take a listen.
I will say that Iran, I think, interjected themselves in this last negotiation. Can you imagine the beating they took? We wiped out their nuclear possibilities. They can start again. If they do, we'll wipe it out faster than you can wave your finger at it. We'll have to do that. We will do that gladly, openly and gladly. They've been saying, Iran's been sending out bad signals, I'll tell you. For a country that just got wiped out, they've been sending very bad signals, very nasty signals. And they shouldn't be doing that. They shouldn't be doing that.
Analysts warn that rebuilding nuclear capacity without diplomatic guarantees would make further strikes all but inevitable. Renewed United Nations sanctions under a European-backed snapback mechanism remain a looming threat, and insiders view Iran's threat to quit the nuclear non-proliferation treaty as a pressure tactic rather than a genuine plan. At home, public frustrations is mounting over blackouts, water shortages, and economic hardship. The war briefly united citizens behind the government, but disillusionment has deepened amid falling incomes and tighter repression. Authorities have also increased security, accelerated executions, and clamped down on suspected espionage networks. Now, in a notable shift, sideline moderates have reappeared in state media, suggesting that the leadership may be testing controlled reforms to ease tensions without altering the system's core structure. While we think that Iran in the coming days is looking forward for enriching its uranium, we hope that this does not go out of the plan, because President Trump and Netanyahu are fully ready to strike again. Now, still on, in this development, the United States is sending air and naval forces to the Southern Caribbean Sea in a stepped-up effort to counter Latin American drug cartels that Washington has designated as global terrorist organizations. This is according to 3 sources familiar with the decision. The deployment, ordered by President Donald Trump, will include several P-8 surveillance aircraft, at least 1 warship, and an attack submarine. United States officials said the operation will unfold over several months, with forces operating in international waters and airspace. Pentagon officials said the naval assets will be used for intelligence and surveillance missions and could serve as launch platforms for targeted strikes if required. The move reflects Trump's long-stated pledge to crack down on drug cartels as part of his broader strategy to curb illegal migration and also to secure the United States southern border. In recent months, the administration has already deployed at least 2 warships to support broader security and anti-trafficking efforts. Let's take a listen.
Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks, bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities.
In addition to President Trump's statement, back in February, Washington designated Mexico's Sinaloa cartel, Venezuela's Tren de Aragua, and other major criminal organizations as global terrorist entities. The United States surveillance of Mexican drug gangs has also intensified, aimed at gathering intelligence to disrupt their operations. Trump has previously offered to send U.S. troops into Mexico to help combat trafficking, an offer the Mexican government has publicly declined. Now we see that as the United States cracks down on drug cartels, it's a call for other nations to do the same. With this is where we'll be drawing the curtain on today's Flash News. Stay tuned for Horizon.
With what is mental health, and then
Okay.
briefly, and then yeah.
So generally, first about health, which is general, everybody knows that health refers to a state of a complete